Welcome everyone to session number 2 of the water harvesting group of sessions that we're having. And this one is on earthworks, which basically means shaping your land to catch water in it. So we're going to talk about how to find contour lines and various ways you can do that, including the A-frame that was requested. We're going to talk about what erosion is, and then move on to how we can harvest water in the street and in the landscape, like in your garden. So we already spoke about contour lines last time in session 1, but it is quite a tricky concept, and I'd like to go over it again. Is there anyone who would like to, maybe just in a sentence or two, tell us what you understand as a contour line? I'm putting you on the spot here, so if you don't feel like it, it's fine. Okay, I'll continue. So contour lines are lines that all are at the same, dots that are all at the same height. So a line consists of a whole lot of dots or points that are all at the same height above a certain point, like the same height above sea level, for example, is often the way we refer to these contour lines. So you might be 100 meters above sea level, and then there's a line that follows that height. And if you were to walk here on this hill along this line, you wouldn't be going up or down, you would be staying completely level. So that's what a contour line is. And I've got a little video lined up to show you a bit more about contour. So I'm just going to switch the screen share to that. Right, you should see a YouTube screen now with a map on it with some contour lines, and I'm just going to press play. From this position onwards, the guy is going to explain what the heights mean.
First layer. Here's the first layer, and as you can see, the remaining contour lines here is painted onto each of the other pieces. So that's your first thing. Now, as you can see, everything is going up. The second piece, again with the remaining contour lines, is added, and now we can start to see the shape, that there's a lot less steepness coming up this way than there would be if you were coming over here. And we add the next piece, and what we just keep doing is adding these. What you see on the top of each one is what's left underneath on the map. Each one of these, as you can see, is the same height all the way around. So that shows you that for each contour interval, if you were to walk around this line, you would never go up, you would never go down. But as you increase the different contour pieces, you'll see that it starts to take shape. Here's another piece. There's another piece. There's a piece that tops off this. This continues on this one over here. This continues even further. And then this tops it off. Now, as you can see, this actually shows you the topography of what this represents. If you were just looking at this, this is what you should see in your mind.
Okay. It's very tricky actually to see contour in the land. If you try and imagine where the line might go, you'll probably wrong, because looking at it by eye, it's really deceptive. You might think something is level and it really isn't. So it's best to use a tool. And when we did our garden, Tahir actually has a dumpy level, which is the thing in this picture, which is probably the best and easiest way to find a contour line. So if you can get hold of one of them, a dumpy level, that probably is the best. But you know, it's probably usually quite difficult to get one of those. And it is actually important to just get these levels right. You know, even a difference of a centimeter or two will make quite a difference. Because water will find any height differences and then flow with gravity, obviously. Assuming that most people can't get a hold of a dumpy level, there are some other ways that are really simple. So I've got another video lined up, and I'm really going to try and get to that video a little bit quicker this time. I think it's really worth watching it. It's a perfect little video by the Peace Corps in Senegal on how to make an A-frame. Actually, but before I do that, I would like to show you just what we're talking about. This is a picture of an A-frame. In this instance, actually, this picture is from the movement in Africa, some fantastic people who are setting up gardens in the Eastern Cape. And they made this A-frame here and just used a spirit level on it. So of course, that's also an option. That yellow thing is a spirit level. It's got a little water bubble in it. And when the bubble's in the middle, then you know that the spirit level is level. And when that's level, then you can find your next point, as you'll see in the video. If someone could just mute. Okay, we had some background noise there. So just so you know what we're talking about, this is an A-frame. It's just called an A-frame because it's like the shape of a letter A. And it's a simple way of finding points along this imaginary contour line. But I'm going to go back to that video now and just show it to you, and then I'll come back to the presentation. Here we are. You should be seeing YouTube again, and I'll press play on the video.
An A-frame is a simple tool used to locate two level points on a landscape and measure meter-wide distances. A-frames are typically used for water harvesting and erosion control techniques such as berms and swales, check dams, and contour planting. Today, urban agriculture volunteer Austin Peterson is going to show us how to make an A-frame. A-frames are constructed using two 1.5 meter sticks, one 1 meter stick, 4 lengths of cord, one fist-sized rock, and a knife or marker. Make sure to have 2 partners on hand. Select sticks that are straight and free of knots. If the sticks are green when cut, strip the bark so that the A-frame joints do not become loose with use. Cut the ends of the 1.5 meter sticks so that they are at a rough 45-degree angle. This way, they will have good contact with the soil surface. If they are too sharp, they will dig into the earth and create an inaccurate reed. Stand the legs up so that the tops cross and the feet stand flat on the soil. Attach the poles together by lashing them with cord. Hold the cord with the short end in one hand and the long end in the other. Wrap the cord around both sticks without crossing them. When the cord is back on your side, tie the ends together, making sure to leave one long length. Take the remaining long end and wrap it around the tied cord between the sticks. Every time you complete a pass, make sure to pull as tightly as possible. You know you are wrapping the lashing tight enough when the edges of the cord begin to cinch into the sticks. After you have made 6 or 7 passes, tie off the cord on one of the sticks using 2 half hitches. Place the crossbar on the ground between the feet to ensure that they are 1 meter apart. Raise the crossbar until it's about halfway between the ground and the top of the A-frame. Have a partner hold the crossbar in place and attach it using the lashing technique. Once the A-frame is lashed together, test it to make sure there are no loose joints. Next, take a meter-long piece of cord. Tie it around the rock on one end. Loosely tie the free end around the top joint of the A-frame. Make sure the rock hangs low enough under the crossbar that it can be wrapped around the bar at least once but not more than 2 times. Make sure the rock is hanging between the leg and the crossbar. The angle of the A-frame is important. If the cord touches the crossbar, it will not give you an accurate read. To calibrate the A-frame, place the feet on 2.
I'll just pause it there. They're talking about calibrating, which is a tricky thing. It means that because the stick here might not be entirely level, it might not be at the same distance from this bottom point as from this bottom point. You're going to find the middle of the A wherever it is. So that's what they mean by calibrating. So you'll see that they actually position it on a slight slope to find 2 points on the stick here, and then they find the middle point between those 2 points, and that is then the middle that you need to know where the 2 sticks, these 2 feet basically, are then level on the same height. We can go over this, but I just wanted to interrupt the video to explain that part and then continue.
Visibly unlevel points. Wait for the rock to come to a resting point. Use a knife or marker to mark this point. Use 2 partners to mark the precise placement of the feet in the soil. Lift the A-frame and spin it 180 degrees. Place the feet in the exact same spots and wait for the rock to settle. Mark this point. Mark the point exactly between these 2 outer marks. This is now your level point. In Senegal, we use A-frames in 3 distinct ways: to measure any distance in meter units, to level burns and check dams, and to find the contour on a landscape.
So that was a very quick introduction to how to make an A-frame. And I realized it was quick and it would be much better to explain it in person. Yeah, did you get a sense of what was being said there? If you like, I can go over it and explain it again, because I think it's worth just understanding that properly. So let's go next. On this picture, basically they've put this stick on it at exactly the right height to make sure that it's level. But if you make an A just from ordinary sticks and haven't got anything for measuring what the lengths are, that's when you do this calibration with the rock, and you actually place it on a hill and check where does the string touch the horizontal bar, and you mark it, and then you swap the feet around and put it at it. Then it's you put the feet in exactly the same positions, but turn it around and again mark where the string hangs down and touches that horizontal bar. And then you should have 2 marks on your A. Maybe one is here and one is here. And then you just find the middle point between those 2. And you can do that with a shoelace. You just put a shoelace across between the 2 positions and then fold it in half. Then you've got the half, the measurement of what the distance is between the 2 points on the stick. I think that's probably as much as I can sort of try and explain this way through Zoom. It really is best to see this in person. But I would recommend also that you maybe just watch that video again. Yeah, but certainly if you have any questions, please do ask them now.
Joe?
Yep.
Hi. So when we have the A-frame, and I know from my own kind of first attempts to get a grip on it. So when you know, as you go from left to right and try to get it right in the middle, to have also little pieces of markers, you know, little stones to help you mark where
yes.
as you go from left to right. So maybe just talk about that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So as you're marking these points, each time, so you've finished your A-frame, you've got it calibrated. Now you're actually finding the points in the land. I wonder if I've got a picture that would help you with that. Sorry, I just need, no, I'm not gonna. So basically, I should have had a better picture for that. You're going to be, in the video, they do show the guy turning the A-frame, and each time the feet land in the right place and the rock is in the right position, he puts a little flag, or as you say, you could use a stone or something, but you're going to mark where that point is, and then move say the left foot of the A-frame to that position, and the right foot will then be one step further, and again you find the right height with it. And you move that foot around until your rock is in the right, or at least your string is hanging down in exactly the right place on the A-frame, and then you see where is that right foot sitting, and you put a marker there. Again, it's just really tricky to explain this over Zoom.
So on a very facetious note, you know the Jerusalem song. I think we an A level, you know, like as the legs go, we must make like a song of that.
I love it. Yeah, we must do that sometime. Okay, so I think I'll move on, unless, please do ask if there's any questions. I'll try and answer them. Okay, I'm going to move on. And so there is one other very basic way, inexpensive way to mark out contour. And that is with this thing called a bunyip level. It's basically just a piece of clear hose pipe. And you can either do it with one person. You can see here in this picture, they've just got a sort of a bucket with the hose pipe attached onto it, and one person. And he has set the level of the water in the bucket to the height that he wants to measure. So he wants to measure the same height from the building onto each of these sticks, these poles. So he's using the water level, and so because he knows that water always finds its level, you'll never have you know, one part of the water sitting lower than the other. Water always finds its level. It's always completely level or horizontal. So he can see in that pipe that the level will be right here. The water will be sitting right there. So then he can mark it, you know, with a marker or some string or something on the pole, and then he can go to the next pole and again find that level. And it's the same with two people. You know, it's actually easier with a second person. We've done that here. We didn't have a clear pipe. We had a hose pipe. It made it very difficult. But I think even with a clear pipe, it's really quite tricky because water moves around very fast. So you have to move very gingerly and gently with it. And even with your thumb on the top of the hose pipe, it just sprays out if you move too fast. So I don't think it's the best way of finding level, but if that's the only thing you have, give it a go, because that's the beauty of water, is it will always tell you exactly where it's level. So this diagram also shows that you know, you can go all over the place and back again. The water will be level inside the pipe, definitely. Any questions on that? Okay, and then before I continue to the water harvesting sort of methods, I would like to just explain a concept that's erosion. You probably know it, but I just thought I'd go over it in case. erosion is what happens when water is like super powerful and actually tears away the topsoil. So you can imagine this hillside was once just one even slope. It didn't have all these valleys in it. But it probably got eroded through losing its plant cover. Maybe it was overgrazed, or I don't know. But anyway, what happened was that water started tearing down across the land and actually removed first the topsoil and then the soil underneath it. And once it gets going, it can really cut down deep into the ground. So this is called degradation, or it's degraded soil. And that's the reason for the degradation is erosion. So erosion means to erode, means to like remove stuff. So, you know, what I wrote down here is water means life. You know, without water, we can have no life. But water can also take life away, because that life that's in the topsoil that we could use for growing more living plants and things is now gone. So water is, you know, wonderfully life-giving, but it can also be super destructive. And so, yeah, you get these landscapes like this one here, where, you know, all the greenery is removed, all the topsoil. And here it's even cracked the remaining soil. It's just so dry because now there's no organic matter in the soil. There's no way for, do you remember we talked about having a sponge, turning the soil into a sponge so that it can hold water. Once all that organic matter has been removed, the plants have been removed, it's no longer a sponge. It can't hold water and it will just dry out. And of course that makes growing food impossible, really. You need to restore the soil before you can grow anything on it. So the way erosion happens, there are basically three factors, and that is it's the amount of water that travels across the ground, it's the speed that it travels at, and also the height difference that might be involved. So any of these factors, like volume, which is the amount, or speed, which is, you know, how fast it goes, or height, which is how steep the slope is that it's traveling across, any of those factors can cause erosion. But it's worse if you get all three of them. So if you get a lot of water moving very fast down a very steep hill, you're almost definitely going to get erosion. Especially, and this is like the fourth factor, is if you don't have any plants on that soil that help to hold it in place. So it's the plants and the roots of the plants that help to stabilize the topsoil. So those are the things that can cause erosion. So to prevent it, to prevent the water from taking away soil, we need to slow it down. You remember this from last time? Spread it out and sink it into the ground. And that will feed the plants and help the root systems to grow better, and it will help to stabilize the soil. And then obviously, you know, cover the ground with plants that have good root systems that will help to bring the life back, or to hold on to the topsoil that's there. So we're back to slow, spread, sink, that motto that we've already mentioned before, but it's so important. I just felt it was worth going over again, because that prevents the water from drying out. It allows us to hold onto the soil, to the water, and it prevents erosion, because if we manage to slow it and spread it, it's much less destructive. It doesn't have that force that can just remove and take everything with it. And then that, of course, also allows us to store the water in the soil, as we said last time. And I just love this picture here, the way it actually shows. I mean, they've obviously added the color here to show what's happening, but I think it's quite beautiful the way it shows how the water's getting spread out through the land. in a way that's kind of the opposite of what we normally see. We normally see little rivers joining big rivers and then eventually going out to the sea. And we're doing the opposite. We're kind of dividing a big flow into smaller ones and bringing it into the far reaches of the land. Here's a beautiful picture that I just wanted to show you how, this is the top of a hill. This is the ridge of the hill. It's got a dam on top and some buildings, and then the hill slopes down this way and this way and this way. I don't know if you can see that, but you can see that they've put some swales in on contour, meaning that the swale is completely all on one level. If you were to walk along here, you wouldn't go up or down. And I think this picture shows amazingly well how the water has sunken into the soil and brought more life into those areas of the hill where it's been able to flow down and slowly infiltrate into the soil. Right, any questions on that? Erica, will you tell me if there are any questions on the chat as well, please? Anything we should be covering? Okay, all right, I'll move on. I also just want to repeat this, this principle of observe and interact. It's the first principle of permaculture. Permaculture's got a bunch of about 12 different principles that if you apply them, you'll probably end up with a good design. And the very first one is observe and interact. And so we've been encouraging you to get out in the rain, to have a look, see what happens when you try and stop a flow, or where does the water flow when it rains? Where does it pool and puddle? And it's really worth just observing that and seeing what happens. So the encouragement is to do long and thoughtful observation before and after making any changes. So you watch for a while, you try out something, and you watch again. And then you accept feedback, which is basically finding out, well, what happens? Did it work? What didn't work? What did work? That's accepting feedback. It's direct feedback from your garden, so that you can gradually make improvements. So this is a repeated process. You know, it's slow and small solutions. So basically, the encouragement is to just try small things, see what happens, try another small tweak to it, and see if that works better, and so on, rather than doing that one big massive operation and then finding, oops, I didn't realize that this or that would happen, and it's going to cause a whole lot more work. So yeah, I just wanted to remind you of that. And right, now we go into water harvesting in the street. You've seen these pictures before, but I think they are quite a good example of what we can do with careful design and thoughtful observation, and then gradual implementation. You can transform a sidewalk. This is actually the very same place as here. This one was taken, I think, in '96, and this one in 2008, so 12 years difference. They completely transformed this land. So from a dry, sandy, you know, uncomfortable walkway, it's now become a beautiful place, which can catch and store the water that falls on it, plus all the water that gets brought in off the road. And this system is just going to get better and better, because once you've got that life in the soil and you're getting more and more organic matter that can store water, it just gets better and better. So now I just wanted to show you a little bit more about how we actually go about that and what these shapes do and what we need to be thinking about when we implement them. So don't worry about all the writing on this picture, but what I wanted to show you here is that the water flows in and it swirls around, right? Especially in the deeper part of the basin. And then it'll swirl out and find the lowest point to come out. So you can have, put your low point where you want it, where you want the water to flow out. So you can see this is called a spillway. So this is the place where you guide the water back out and maybe into another basin or wherever you want to take it next. So the water will move like this. On the side of a street, it might look like this. You may have a curb, in which case, you know, you can do a neat curb cut. We need to find out whether, you know, how the council views this. I know that in Tucson, where Brad Lancaster lives, who wrote this book, Harvesting Rainwater, you know, at first it was illegal, but it's now actually encouraged by the municipality, and they're doing it themselves as well. I see Vuyani has raised his hand. Would you like to say anything?
The swells, if you, when you maybe doing your farming on a flat surface, you can still do the swell on that flat surface.
Yes, okay. I'm going to be talking about swales, and swales really are for a slope. If you're on a flat surface, this basin will work, and I'll tell you about some other things that work on a flat surface. But the swales really are more for a hill, or you know, at least some slope. So I'll come to that. But you can see that these basins, it's pretty level where Brad Lancaster has been doing this stuff. So these basins will definitely work in a level area. And actually, you'll normally find there is at least a slight bit of slope. I mean, there's almost no place that is completely level. And if you watch the rain outside your place, you'll probably find it does have a direction. It does flow in a certain direction, and it never flows in the other direction. So it's definitely finding through gravity its path. So you can work with that direction, with that gravity. But I'm not saying you can use swales where it's that level, but you can work with whatever the direction is of the flow. And put that, you know, use that to your advantage. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm going to continue. So yeah, it is actually, especially for, oh, I see Vuyani, you please speak again. Okay, I just see a thumbs up. Great. Thanks, Vuyani. I'll continue in that case. So you've raised your hand, Vuyani. Would you like to say another thing? Okay, I'll continue. I understand it's very slow. This feedback is tricky, so we'll just work with it. So yeah, I was just saying that we've got two kinds of basins here. One is with the curb cut, and one is where there's no curb. But you know, obviously you can do it in both situations. The tricky thing is just to look at the levels. And I do have a slide later that explains a bit more about the levels. Because basically what's going to happen here, I'm assuming the water will come from this side. It flows down this way, and then it flows into the basin and fills it up more and more until it gets to the level where it's the same as the water that's flowing down. And when it gets to the same level, it just stops filling up further, obviously, and then the water runs on along the road. So yeah, you want to make, I'll show you the levels later just now in a screen. Yeah, so that's what I was showing you there. So the water is coming down from this side and it goes in and around and fills up, and then it swirls around in here until it has filled up to the level of the water outside. And as soon as the water inside and the water outside are the same height, it'll continue flowing on and it won't fill up anymore. So that's quite important, because obviously you don't want it washing all over the place, maybe going into the foundations of a house nearby or whatever. So you want to keep it in the basin and to make sure it doesn't overflow where you don't want it. And there's this picture again, just showing again that we want to basically bring water into the soil, drain it off the hard surfaces, and use it where we want it, instead of draining it away, which is the normal way of doing things in urban sort of streetscapes. We normally just want to get rid of the water, and so we're actually turning things around and inviting water into the soil, just through careful design, in a carefully managed way, so that it's not destructive and it just brings benefits. So here's the one with the levels, and unfortunately it's quite a complicated slide, and I don't think we need to worry too much about all the text, but I just want to show you these 3 levels. You've got the level of the pavement, and that is probably, it is going to be higher than the street, right? So the pavement will always be above the water. And then you can have a little terrace that can be higher up, and that can be at the same height as your curb cut. So I'll just explain what this is. This is the height of the whole curb, and when you cut it away at that inlet, you cut it down to this level, right? So now the water will flow in over the cut and into this basin. And in the middle, you can have plants that don't mind sitting in water, and you can cover the soil with mulch. And higher up, you can have a tree, for example. The tree doesn't need to be right in the bottom of the basin, because its roots actually will benefit from the water, even if it's just sitting here in this mulch basin. And at this point, you might want to have some stones just to protect the soil so it doesn't get washed away. Because remember, what causes erosion is volume, height, and speed. And if you get a lot of water coming in fast over this height difference, it might actually start eroding the soil away. So you want to maybe have some stones there to protect the flow, the area where the water will be moving. And then over here, you don't need to have stones, because here it shouldn't be moving much. It'll just be sitting here. Right, yep.
Yeah, Jill. So
Yes.
for those of us who live in the suburbs where they have like the verge, instead of being soil, there's cement or tar. One would cut the curb, make a little channel, then into one's yard.
Yep.
To relay the water in. So how would that work? So
yeah.
the question on two levels, like practically, so it will come in. So I live at the kind of end of a slope, so it's going down. So the water will come in, cut the curb, make a channel. So first of all, and as Erika would say, just do it. Don't worry about what the council will say. But so do that. And then when it fills up, it will push back into the street and just go further down to where.
Exactly. Yeah. So you want to bring it in at the highest point. Brad Lancaster talks about the highest point, or the first point, the best point, and the last possible point. But you want to get that point should be as high as possible.
So the point that is within my control.
Exactly, the highest point that you can get access to.
Yes.
And yeah.
Preferably talking to my neighbors and my neighbors' neighbors so that they do the same thing and it goes into their yard and eventually the flow will get to mine. So there's also the thing about talking to the neighbors so that, you know, the further up the stream, people also benefit from this.
Yeah, with a pavement is tricky, I must say, because there could be all sorts of services down there. There could be water pipes, there could be electric lines, and I think you could get into big trouble. So I think a pavement, I do think it's tricky. If you can somehow guide it over the pavement, that would be first prize. But cutting through the pavement, I think that could be quite problematic. But you know, you might find there's some way of putting down sandbags or something to actually just take the water across. If you can do that, maybe there's already a point where it's lowered for a driveway, for example, and you take it from there. It's already come across the pavement without cutting it. And you take it from the sort of lower part of that driveway and guide it then into the next property. That might be a way to do it. And sandbags are removable. You know, if somebody complains, you just remove them, but you put them back, you know, just when it rains, and then you take them away again. That might be a way to do it without upsetting too many people.
But sometimes we've got to upset people, right, to get things.
Okay. Yeah,
Thanks.
all right. Okay. Next, yeah, all right. So any other questions on that? All right, moving on. Now about, this is so earthworks in the garden, in the landscape. Again, it's difficult to see by eye whether this is on contour, but I'm guessing it is. It looks by eye as if this might be higher over here, but I imagine they actually did put these beds on contour. And that in itself, without any major, you know, earthworks or whatever, is very wise. It just, you know, if you imagine the water flowing down from here, each time it reaches a bed, it will just spread out. So each of these beds will slow down the water and make it sink in. So that's the first thing you can do. Very simple, is just find the contour in your garden. And that's called planting on contour, basically. And you can end up with really beautiful shapes as well. So this is now before planting, but you can end up with these lovely curves, and that will really help to just bring more water into your soil, to hold onto the soil that falls on it, and any other water that flows down from above. And the plants in themselves will slow down the water from and offer you know, roots for the water to follow down. So each plant is kind of a conductor into the soil, if you like. So the water has a route to follow. And I must say, I just added this picture because it's so beautiful. I don't even know where their paths are, but it's just gorgeous. So yeah, planting on contour, I think also just makes for great beauty. So what's the problem with this picture? It also looks quite sort of beautiful in a way, these smooth green hills. And we often see landscapes like this, you know, driving outside of town. But there's a massive problem with something here. Anyone want to guess what it is? okay, maybe it's too simple. So what they've done here is they've plowed off contour. They've made these lines across the landscape. They've just gone right across the hills without even thinking about contour. And we often see that. I've seen wheat fields and sugarcane and pineapples and all those kind of things being grown without any care for how the water will flow on the landscape. And basically, each of these lines here is a drain. It will just remove water. It will not allow the water to sink in. So I have seen, though, that maybe in the last 10 years or so, you're seeing more and more farmers actually moving and planting in rows that are on contour. It's still monoculture, which is hugely problematic and probably full of pesticides and everything else, but at least they are starting to do more on contour, which is far more water wise than it used to be, where they just pretended it was completely flat and just sort of powered through. Right, some more shapes. You have seen this picture before, but we'll go into a bit more detail on all the various sort of tree pans that one can try and make. In this case, the slope is obviously up here. The water comes down this way, and you can't really see it in the picture, but it's open here. The water can flow into the circle at the top, but then it gets held by this little wall that we made just with the soil on the lower side of the tree. So that's without any digging, just by raising the soil a little bit, not making any trench or anything. We're already helping more water to reach this tree than would have if we just left it as an ordinary slope. And here's a diagram of that idea. So, but these are boomerangs, they call them. I mean, you can make them, sharp angles, or you can make them rounder. It doesn't really matter. And but you can see that before this was done, here's the little valley. The water would run down in the valley, and it would just come all the way down and out, and then it would be gone. And so what they did is they put a sort of upside down boomerang up here to spread the water, and you can see it flows into the top boomerang here. And then when this boomerang fills up, it comes out at the side and flows into the next one, and so on. This one actually spills into two sides, this one and this one. And by allowing all these boomerangs to just fill up gradually, it spreads out the water. So again, it's that slow spread sink. So it used to rush down on the fastest route down. Now it gets slowed down by bringing it across the hill. It gets spread out, and this whole hillside gets hydrated. Which wasn't the case before this was done. So that's a very clever and simple design feature that it can be done easily. You can do it with rocks. You can pile up soil, and that will already make a huge difference. Here, similarly, they've worked with slightly rounder shapes. They say here that it's on contour. So the boomerangs aren't on contour, but you can see that they actually are sort of pointing up the hill. So they have the same sort of effect as being on contour. So you see here the slope goes down this way, and each of these berms or short swales just slows down the water and allows the water to infiltrate. And you don't have to have the trees in the swales, because actually the trees have big root systems. So even if there's the infiltration place is just somewhere near a tree, the tree will get that water. And there's another diagram of the same idea. And these aren't quite on contour. You'll see that they've been sort of curled up a little bit at the top to sort of hold the water better. But the same idea applies. The water will spill out and then fill up the next one. And then when that's full, it'll spill out and so on. So it's a sort of passive water, yeah, sort of hydration technique. Here's a lovely example in the desert, just with rocks. So yeah, we work with what we've got. And in this place, they seem to have had a lot of rocks available. And it's just gathering the water for these plants. Another desert here. It looks as if the hill is up here, but I think it must be slightly tilted. I would imagine that the slope goes up this way, and the water would flow down into these sort of half moon shapes. And you can see the difference it makes. I think this is somewhere in Kenya, how, you know, the growth is inside these little pockets. So any questions on the tree pans, boomerangs, and half moons? Okay, I'm going to continue on. You can also ask again at the end. Thanks for the thumbs up. So now we come to the swales. This is, I think, the big topic that Erica asked for, the sort of deep dive into the swales. I'll give it my best. So you've seen pictures before of swales. Here's another one. So basically, it's on a slope. So to answer Voyani's question again, a swale is really only appropriate on a slope. So on a hill where there's a gradient where the water will flow in a certain direction. And the way they would have done it is they would have found a contour line here. If you can see the mouse, they would have drawn a line across the ground at this point. And then they would have dug down from here. And any soil that they took out of here, they would have piled up on this side. So the berm always goes on the lower side of the slope. And it obviously helps to hold the water in place. The berm is usually higher than the water will ever sit. But that's fine because the plants will get their roots down into this water plume, as they call it, this sort of lens of water that then will start to form underneath. Another point they would have a contour line is here. So when you're finishing the swale, you make sure that the bottom of the swale is also on contour. And that's what we see here. This is a swale in my garden when we were putting in the second lot of swales. And you can see I've put here 2 orange lines. Both of these 2 orange lines would be on contour. So we would have gone along with an A-frame and found this point, and then turned the A-frame around and found another point that's at the same height as the first point. And then we would have, put a peg in, and then turned the A-frame around again, found another point, and so on. And we would have moved through and found that it actually makes this kind of curve. Then we would have dug down and made the trench. So this bottom part is called the trench. And any soil taken out gets piled up on this side, just loosely uncompacted, to make the berm. And the flow of water is from this side. So the hill goes up this side, the water comes down from this side, it flows into the trench, and then it gets held by the berm so it doesn't, it doesn't continue flowing down. And then, yeah, as I've said before, it's a bit like a massive big bath. So it fills up, the whole thing fills up at the same time if we've got this level right, this bottom of the trench is on contour, then the whole thing fills up as one big body of water, and the water slowly comes up. And then we choose where we want the water to spill out when it's got to the level that we say it's now, we don't want any more, it's full. And we make a spillway. In our case, it's over here, but I'll show you some more pictures of other spillways. In our case, this is the lowest part of the swale, of this upper contour line. It dips down a little bit here. So that is where the water spills out. And it actually pours out into another swale that's over here. Right, any questions on that? Because that's pretty important. And I think I was maybe confused that a little bit in my last talk. So Erica, just let me know if that's clear.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Erica.
So Joe.
Yes.
Question. So when the water goes out on the spillway, which is the lowest part of the swale, it will swirl around that tree and saturate the tree.
Yeah, no. Okay. Sorry, that's not well marked. I see what you're seeing. Okay. The spillway is actually over here. This is actually still the berm, and it's
still on top.
Yeah, that's confusing. I realize now why that would look that way. But actually the spillway is over here, and it just goes behind the tree. That's something we could have thought about doing, actually, is to attach a basin to the swale. But it's not actually how we did it. But that's actually a good idea. I like it. For an existing tree that's a bit bigger, to have a little spillway into another basin that just serves that tree. It's a nice idea. It's not what we did, though. So I just wanted to show you also how we can shape the top of the berm. So this was on the course I attended in 2015. This is Tahir here. Alex is somewhere as well. They were my two teachers on the PDC I attended, the Permaculture Design Certificate course. And what we did was we also shaped the top of the berm into little flat pans with little walls around them. So again, just to hold the water in place for a bit longer, so it doesn't just flow off the top of the berm. This is actually a very nice idea. We didn't do that, or let's say we hadn't done it yet here. This was what we did before all the participants arrived. And then when they arrived, they actually made those shapes on the top of the berm as well. So they flattened the top and made these little walls. I don't know if you can see that. There's sort of little rectangular spaces on top of the berm to hold the water in place for these plants that were put on top of the berm. All right, this picture just serves to show that water, you'll see down here, the line says the flow of water crosses contours at 90 degrees. What that basically means is, you actually all know this. It means that if you've got a contour line crossing the land that's all one level, the water will cross that line at 90 degrees, which is like a T, right? That's 90 degrees. So if this is the contour, the water will flow down at 90 degrees. So you know where the water will flow if you know where your contours are. And that's actually all I want to say about that slide. The rest is you know, just looks a bit complicated. So where do you place a swale? You want to put it not too close to a building. You don't want to be sort of hydrating the foundations of your house. And you want to make sure that you're designing in a way that removes water away from a building. You certainly, as I say, you don't want to be, you know, flooding your downstairs part of the building. You also shouldn't put it anywhere, or not anywhere, but not too near a septic tank, or especially the leach field, or the what do you call it, the soak away of a septic tank, because yeah, you could end up having quite an unhygienic mess. The slope should be between about 3 and 15%. That's talking about how steep the slope is. And what that means is it's not flat, but it's also not too steep either. Like if it's a really steep hill, then you're looking more at terracing rather than putting in swales. So that's what that means. It's not entirely flat, but it's also not really steep. So it's a hill basically. And one usually does it in conjunction with perennial plantings. With veggies, I think it depends on your design and how you do it. But yeah, it might not work so well with annuals, especially with seedlings and things. If you bring a big flow of water in, they'll just get washed away. So yeah, perennial plantings. I'm thinking of Vuyani's Guguletu food forest. That's perfect for this kind of thing. If it's got a hill, so obviously the tree basins are a better idea if it's flat. This is a slide talking about slope. Yeah, I've actually already said it. You know, if it's too steep, you actually have to make terraces. So you start building little walls to support to hold the water, because the earthworks alone won't be enough. And if it's very shallow, then you can make wider trenches and berms. And if it's a bit more steep, then you make narrower ones, and the spacing would change as well. But I don't think we need to go too much into that. And of course, as I've already said, we always want to design in an overflow. So design for disaster, as we said. And so see how you can use that overflow. Make it a resource. Use it as a resource. So see where you can take the water to another place. And that's another reason why we want to start at the highest point, so that we get to put the water in as many places as possible before we lose it out the bottom of the system. Or not lose it, we actually want to direct it very specifically out where we want to take it out. That must be part of the design, that we decide where we want to take it out and make sure that that's where it goes out, back into a storm drain or wherever that it's appropriate. So because if you have an unplanned overflow, you might get erosion. So this is why design is important. So you decide where the water goes, and you don't sort of try and wait to find out where your weakest or lowest point is. So of course that's part of that that cycle of observing, interacting, and accepting feedback. You might find that, oh boy, there's the weakest, lowest point. It's not where I thought it was. I'll do something about it and see what happens in the next rain. So a little bit more on spillways. Spillways, so this is just the slope here, and you can see this is a swale on Contour. Here's another swale on Contour. And what they've decided to do is to allow the water to spill over at a specific place. And it spreads out then, because this berm is on Contour, sorry, this swale is on Contour. It can go left or right because it's completely level. So it spreads out again. And then they've decided that the next place they'll allow it to overflow is here. And again, because now at these points, at these spillways, we're allowing the water to move, to flow. And there's a height difference, there's a volume of water, and there might be some speed in it. It could erode and start making a channel here. So that's why they've reinforced it with some stones. to protect the soil from being washed away at these points. So if you're expecting a big flow, put some rocks in on your spillways. In my case, I only wish I had that kind of a flow. You know, it's never caused any sort of, it's never made a little channel in the soil where it overflows. So we don't have the stones in our swell because we don't have those quantities. So here are some photographs. Here's one photo of a spillway, just simple with a few rocks. And so, yeah, they've decided that this is where they want to take the water out of the swale, and then that'll go off to some other part of the land. And here's another one, just so you get to see how that can look. And actually, I see the little flags here. I think this is where they placed their flags as they went round with an A-frame or something to find the contour line. They put in these little flags. So talking about the heights again, the top of the berm needs to be below the house. You basically, it looks a bit different in this picture. It looks as if the berm might be higher than the bottom of the house, but you actually want to make sure it's lower so that yeah, no water will ever flow towards the house from the berm. So you want the berm to be lower and to direct water away. And the top of the spillway is below the top of the berm, right? Let's think about the top of the spillway is below the top of the berm, of course. So this is the top of the berm, and this is the spillway. And of course, the spillway has got to be lower than the berm so that the water can flow out where we want it to flow out. It's obviously higher than the lower points of this basin. And then it flows through to the next one. And again, it flows in at a slightly higher point, out at a slightly lower one. And that's how we move it through the land from one basin to another. And the top of the spillway is above the bottom of the basin. That makes sense as well, doesn't it? So you allow the water to build up a little bit in the basin before it spills out. So all this just needs to be thought about when you're doing it. So you have to imagine what it's going to look like when it fills up, and what will happen when the water is at this level, what will happen when the water is at this level, and so on. Where will it spill out? Right, and then there's another kind of swale. Most swales that we've been talking about are on contour, so they're on that imaginary line of points that are all the same height. An off-contour swale is a different thing, and that's where you actually go a little bit, you keep moving lower, you move away from a certain contour line. So in this case, on this picture, this dotted line is the contour, and it's maybe a little bit difficult to see, but at the beginning of this line here, the berm starts right on the contour, but by the time it gets to the end here, it's a bit further away. The berm is a bit off. It's no longer on the contour. There's a distance here, so it's very slightly off contour. And what that will do is, of course, when water comes into this area, water will follow the easiest path. It will be taken by gravity to the lowest point. So it will flow first here along the contour, but then after a while, it'll be away from the contour. So it'll be flowing downwards. So basically, we've made a drain. So that is a way for moving water from one place to another, is to have a slightly off-contour berm, and then the water will slowly just travel across to another place, to where we want it to be. So a drain is for moving water, right? And an on-contour swale is for holding it in one place. So if we're on contour, we're holding the water. If we're off contour, we're gradually allowing it to flow to some other place. Any questions about that? Okay, then there's one more thing I want to talk about, and this is for level spaces and for smaller gardens. So you wouldn't do this probably on a farm, but for a smaller garden, it's quite appropriate, especially if things are more or less level. As we said, things are probably never exactly level, but if it's more or less level, you can have a thing called a French drain, or a trench drain is another word that people use for this. So it's basically just a trench filled maybe with a pipe and then with gravel. So I'll show you this slotted pipe. It's a pipe that's got little holes in it, and you wrap it in this thing called geotextile, or bidum it's sometimes called. That's the product name, bidum. So you wrap it in bidum so that you don't get sand filling all the little holes in the pipe. And that is a way to move water around in your soil as well. So here's a picture of this slotted pipe. Some people also call it drain tile, which just to me is an odd word for a pipe to call it a tile, but yeah, that's seems to be quite common that that's what they call it. And you don't have to have, so this is a comparison, you can either just have gravel covered with sand or soil or whatever and make it use it as a pathway, or you can have gravel with this pipe going through it. And if you've got the pipe, it just helps to move the water faster through the system. So it's a matter of judging how much flow you want. But the simple way, you know, and you're not even sort of adding to the plastic and the planet, is to just use gravel. And the spaces between the gravel will allow water to flow through it and seep out of the trench into the soil around it. So you're doing a similar thing to it as if you had a swale. It's a way of allowing water to infiltrate slowly into an area. So here's a space that has been prepared for these French or trench drains. You can see it's more or less level, and they've made a sort of a leaf structure or a sort of branch structure that water will seep through, presumably off, excuse me, probably the catchment off a roof, will be taken out into the garden in this way. And again, it's pretty important to just make sure that the pipe that you lay, or that the trenches that you make here, are level. So it's quite useful to just use that A level again, that A-frame, to make these trenches level, because if there are, you know, differences, you might find that one trench gets all the water and the other ones are sitting a tiny bit higher and they just don't get any water. So it's worth doing the work. It's quite fiddly, but it'll work better if you put in that effort at the start. And in permaculture, we like to talk about stacking functions, using one thing for many purposes, using, you know, getting lots of benefits out of one element. And in this case, we can see that this gravel trench is also going to be a pathway. So when you design it, you put those pipes where you're going to want your pathways to be. So you think about the shapes of your beds that are going to be next to the pathway, and those beds will, you know, get water seeping into them from the path. So it's a nice way to save space and stack functions. Okay, any questions about that? And I'm just, while you do that, I'm going to find my water bottle. I've got something in my throat. Any questions about that? Oh, okay, we've got to the end, and I just wrote down the homework questions here, but before we get to that, I'd just like to see if there are any Any general questions about everything we've covered today? Or comments, or anything you'd like to say at this point, at the end of the talk? No Monde, yes?
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you, Joe. I think that's more of a comment. I'm thinking just not so long ago, a while back, one of the participants in the Food Growers Initiative group posted a picture. I think she was in Philippi in one of the schools there. I remember me and Vianney went once, where she had put down a whole lot of carpets to sort of drain water. She has a problem with water. I think her garden is Esenvelo. I'm just thinking, I hope that she's here, because then she would, I'm just thinking of how she would benefit, and how she can collect or sort of make the swales or the French drains to sort of direct all that water maybe to like a DIY dam, just to channel all the water instead of, because now when we got there, she had like a whole lot of cardboard, and she was collecting carpets so that just to raise the ground level, because there was too much water collecting in that particular garden. Yeah, and then also I'm thinking, because I have problems with water at my garden. I think we had this chat last week when we had no shows. They dug. I didn't understand it at first, so I just want to say thank you, because now I'm understanding it more what they did, because it was difficult for me to explain it to somebody else. So I just want to say thank you. But what they did was they drilled a hole. I know it was below 28 meters down, and they took up a PVC pipe and they cut slits all the way the length of the hole, and then they put the pipe in what looked like painter holes, and they sunk the pipe, and they put gravel all around the pipe, and then they sunk the pump, so it's like an underground pump. And what he said was the water will collect, and it will come through the gravel, through the painter holes into the pipe, and then the pump will take then the pipe into the tank. So it makes sense now. I didn't understand it then. I was like, okay, thank you for getting me water, but you're talking French to me now. But now, thank you so much. Now I'm understanding it. I just want to say thank you, Joe. Yeah. Awesome.
It's great pleasure, and that's lovely feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, anyone else? Okay, so I mean, I don't know, I'm aware of time and data and all that, but if anyone would like to go over the questions that we had for homework, we can do that. But I completely understand if you want to leave the session now. So those who want to leave can do so, and those who would like to discuss the homework can stay behind if you'd like to. I'm certainly available for that. Okay, well, it looks like you're all staying, so that's great. But yeah, just feel free to leave at any point. So if you remember, after the last, well, not the most recent rain, but a previous rain, I measured 10 mils of rain. I don't know how much you got that time, but I said, if a roof is 6 meters long and 5 meters wide, how much rain in liters fell on that roof last night if we got 10 mils of rain? So that's using the information that I showed you in the first session on how to calculate a catchment, and then how to calculate your water that you catch based on how much rain you've got. So did anyone have an answer for that one? Okay, so the way we would calculate that is for the catchment, we have 6 meters by 5 meters, so that we can just multiply that. 6 meters times 5 meters is 30. Okay, and then we multiply the catchment by the rainfall. So the 30 by times 10 is 300. And that means that we can catch 300 liters from that catchment if we get 10 mils of rain. So the answer to this one is 300 liters. The second question was just how big is your garden in square meters? So I was encouraging you to go out and measure. It's tricky if it's not just a rectangular garden, if there are different spaces to add up. But I can't give you the answer to that one, but it was just for you to maybe find out how big your garden is. And then based on that, the invitation was to ask, well, how much water did you catch if we had 10 mils of rain? So basically, it's whatever your area is. Say you've got 400 square meters of garden. You multiply by 10, you get 4,000. So you would catch 4,000 liters if you have a 400 square meter roof, for example, that you're catching it off. And then the last question, if a bucket can hold 10 liters, how many buckets of water did your garden receive last night? And that's a little bit tricky because the 10 is the same number as the 10 mils of rain. So your 10 mils of rain will actually fill 1 bucket per square meter. So say, if we go back to this example of the 6 by 5, we've got 30 square meters. Then if we're getting 10 mils, that means we're getting 10 liters on every square meter. So 10 liters fits into 1 bucket. So we actually would have received exactly 1 bucket of water on each square meter of the garden. I quite like imagining it that way, you know, when we have 10 mils of rain, I think, oh, okay, every square meter of garden has got a bucket of water poured onto it. Now I sort of can imagine how much water has gone into my soil. So it's quite a nice way of thinking, a way to think about it. So 10 mils is quite a nice number, because then you know that's about the size of a bucket. So each square meter got a bucket. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, I think that's it then. So yeah, I hope that was interesting and you learned something. And yeah, thanks very much for coming, and all the best. And do let me know what you're doing in your garden with earthworks and water harvesting. I'd really love to hear if this inspires you to make some changes, to catch some water. And I'd love to come and see what you're doing. So please pop me a message. I'm really interested to see what comes of all of this. So yeah, stay in touch, please. I don't know if there's going to be another session, but yeah, let's see. We'll see what happens. But yeah, all the best, everyone, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Jill. That's been absolutely fantastic. And thank you everybody for attending. Maybe a next session can be in someone's garden where we can go through what's been done and collectively brainstorm ideas for that space.
That's a great idea. I'd love that.
Well, thank you, everybody. Please unmute and say good night.
Good night.
Thank you very
night,
much.
everyone.
Goodbye,
Ciao,
everybody.
ciao.
Bye-bye,
See you,
everyone.
bye.
Well, bye.
Ciao.
Bye.